Jamie Cheek is also on the ballot, hoping to move on to November. She joins us now to explain why she wants the job and why she says she's the best candidate to represent the party. Jamie, welcome to Inside Utah Politics. Glad to have you with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Let's get right into your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've done throughout life.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Wyoming, and about 9 years ago I moved here to Utah. I currently live in Ogden with my husband and 3-year-old daughter. I'm employed right now with the Department of Workforce Services and the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation as a district director, which means that I manage a $1 million plus budget and supervise over 17 employees. And I think the reason that that's important and why it qualifies me to go to Congress is for 2 reasons. One, I started with my agency at the entry level as a secretary, and I worked my way up while going to school to get my master's degree to become a district director. The second piece is that being that I work for Department of Workforce Services, I see how legislation meets the road and how we're able to implement legislation in a way that helps people. And so understanding that, I think, gives me great insight into how it is that we craft legislation and how it is that we vote for that legislation.
So you moved here to Utah 9 years ago from Wyoming, 2 very red states. You're running as a Democrat. What are the differences, if any, between being a Democrat in Wyoming versus Utah?
Yeah, so Wyoming's, and honestly Utah too, they have that real strong independent streak. And so I think that there's a lot of similarities. The ruralness is really important and making sure that we're talking to those communities and giving them the services that they need. And then that there's kind of the same feeling that we need to talk about family values and those kitchen table issues and really get down to it when they're looking at their candidates. And so they're kind of largely just the same.
So you look at Congress today, there's a lot of partisan fighting. A lot of Congress men and women lament that they're not able to get what they want done in Washington, D.C. So what's your interest in taking your life experience and representing Utah in Congress?
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm really proud of is that we're running a really progressive liberal campaign, which is something that doesn't happen very often here in Utah. And the reason I think that that gives us a step up when we look at partisan politics is because we're fighting for issues that matter to all Utahns. And we know that bipartisanship means that we need to come together and talk about the issues. And so when we compromise, Democrats get a win when we have these more progressive leanings. So when we talk about health care, we don't have to settle and we don't have to give in for the sake of bipartisanship. So I think that that's a unique thing that I have specifically for CD1, but also for most of the candidates here in Utah. And so I think that gives me the ability to come to the table in honesty and have great conversations with my counterparts.
So when you define yourself as running a progressive campaign, what are the most important issues to you?
Absolutely. So I have 3 cornerstones. The first is healthcare. It needs to be more accessible. It needs to be more affordable. I also talk a lot about education. We definitely need to improve it, but also give it as an opportunity for all Americans who want it. And then also we need to clear the air. CD1 has 2 of the top 20 most air polluted cities in the country. And so we need to do something about it. And the best way to do that is to have these conversations in Washington.
A lot of those issues that people are championing are kind of being put to the side right now because we're dealing with the pandemic. Your response to how we've seen lawmakers on the national level deal with the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, so I think that we've definitely had a failure of leadership when it comes to this pandemic. We should have had more testing sooner, and then we also need to make sure that we had access to the PPE materials. We had them stockpiled and weren't really checking them, and so most of them were not in good standing when we needed to use them. So for the future, if this is to happen again, we need to make sure we're giving access to testing, that we have affordable health care for everyone, and that we have the infrastructure to mass produce PPE as needed.
So back to my point a little earlier, how do you as one individual, one congresswoman, go to Washington and get that done? Do what you would want to do in that situation?
Yeah, well, I think it starts by being able to have these conversations. I think with the Democrats, having the House right now, that starts that conversation. I think that we need to be making sure that we're listening to our counterparts and seeing where we can find the middle on those issues. I think for too long we've let the partisan divide determine what it is that we're going to get done. And so we need to move those partisan politics kind of out of the way. And what is it that we can do to actually help Americans?
Do you see that happening, though? Do you see Washington, the two sides coming together to get things done?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable and we have to do it. This partisan divide has put too many people at risk. We have millions of Americans who've lost their health care and lost their jobs. We've shed 20.5 million jobs just since the coronavirus started. So we're going to have to do something different to make a difference.
All right, so in addition to the health side, the public health side of this, there's the economic side. We've seen states across the country kind of take this on in different ways. How do you balance public health versus economic health in this situation?
Yeah, well, I think we need to let the science guide us. We need to be following CDC guidelines. Utah is reopening. We are in that yellow phase right now. And I think that we just need to be making sure that we're following those guidelines, that we're wearing masks as needed, that we're following social distancing, that we're self-checking ourselves to make sure that we're not going into public if we're experiencing any of those symptoms. And that's how we make sure we keep the people safe. And then we start looking at how do we have these jobs or how do we create these jobs? I work with people with disabilities and we help find them employment, and COVID-19 directly impacted them and furloughed, hundreds of them. And so that's affecting everyone in Utah. So jobs are changing. The world is different now. And so we need to be able to move forward and change what we think about work and how it is that we access the economy in general.
So you're okay with the steps Utah is taking right now, given this careful approach to moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that we went from orange to yellow within 2 weeks. I think that we could have taken a little bit more time. Just a couple days ago, we had the most deadliest day here in Utah, and we didn't really wait to see the impact of orange before we moved to yellow. But Governor Herbert has moved us to yellow, so the best that we can do is just, try and be safe within our communities and our families and, do what we can.
Hill Air Force Base, a staple in Utah's 1st Congressional District. Your thoughts of the importance and what you would do regarding Hill Air Force Base if elected?
Yeah, absolutely. Hill Air Force Base is critical to CD1, but also to Utah's military. And so definitely my role would be to protect it. I think that we need to be making sure that they're getting the provisions that they need. Most recently, our Republican counterparts allowed the Trump administration to steal millions of dollars to build a border wall that isn't necessary. As a Democratic representative, I would not let that happen. And then we also need to be making sure that we're focusing on the jobs that are on Hill Air Force Base and, modernizing our military and providing training and providing technology to allow them to be specialized, kind of like the F-35s.
I want to get your take on public lands. Outgoing Representative Rob Bishop, that was a big part of his legacy that he will be leaving. Your thoughts and assessment on how he approached public lands?
Well, public lands absolutely need to be protected at all costs. I think that Rob Bishop pushed for the reduction in barriers by 85%. So as a Democratic representative, I would never advocate for that, and I never would have let that happen.
Okay, real quick, we're running out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity to make your pitch to Democratic voters. Why should they go with you on June 30th?
Absolutely. I'm Jamie Cheek. I'm running to be the first Democratic Congresswoman for Utah's 1st Congressional District. If you believe that healthcare should be accessible and affordable, vote for me. If you think education should be an opportunity for all Americans, vote for me. If you believe the environment is in a climate crisis and we need to do something about it, vote for me. And you can find me on all social media as well as cheek4utah.com.
All right, we're going to have to end on that note. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.